Hello, everybody, and welcome to this informational session on a funded research opportunity for VCU students. The project itself is called The Impacts of Neocolonial Rule on Environmental Governance in the U.S. Territories. I'm Professor Andrea Simonelli. I'm an associate professor of political science at VCU, and we are sponsoring this opportunity with the partnership of VCU's Institute for Sustainable Energy and Environment, but also with the Universities of Guam and University of Puerto Rico. So hopefully we'll get you enough information here to be able to make a decision and know what's going on. So quickly, the agenda is to do a quick intro of the project, overview of what we're up to, different aspects that we're looking into, the locations, timeline, and then finally, as much FAQ as I could come up with to try to make sure that I covered just about everything you might need to know. But I'm happy to take additional questions if there's something I did not cover. So, small islands have been on the front lines of climate impacts for decades. This is something that I work on in my personal research. My work is on climate migration and displacement, so I work on just about every beautiful small island you can imagine. And islands' ability to adapt to these changing conditions tends to be mitigated by their size and local resources in terms of what they have available to be able to make transitions and to invest in local adaptations. But not all islands have the same autonomy to make these decisions about their future equally, and that's where this project comes in. Because the variation among the impacts, resilience, and government response across the U.S. territories is what we're investigating, specifically Guam and Puerto Rico. Because unlike their neighbors that are independent countries, everything is mitigated through the U.S. And while the territories are the U.S., they tend to be ignored and have some different legislative barriers to being able to have, um, again, any sort of real autonomy in decision making. So it's a forced dependency that puts them in this precarious position of navigating their local needs, which often are weighed against the desires of what the grander government wants. So this is a neo-colonial relationship in that as a territory, you don't get a say, but also how do we work with this? How are the people day to day handling these things? How is this playing out? So students will investigate climate impacts and local resilience across different sectors with the help of a PI. Hi, I'm your PI, which is a principal investigator. And each individual project is going to be connected thematically through the impact of nested governments on local response. So, how is it that the local governance has to interact with federal governance? And how does this potentially create difficulties for those trying to make changes on the ground? So the project itself came from discussions with a donor who's come to VCU to, well, basically give us money to provide this type of opportunity because the donor really would like students to be able to go in the field through experiential learning, be able to understand what's happening with these complications in a couple locations and come out of it not just more well-versed as researchers, but being able to have some solid pieces for your resume to move forward. So the project itself is students are going to be investigating one aspect of environmental governance in either Guam or Puerto Rico. They will be parallel projects. There's going to be a team that goes to Guam and a team that goes to Puerto Rico. And you'll be looking at the same aspects, but in the different locations. It's a comparative case study. But what you also have is a partner on the ground at a local university. So each VCU student will be pairing with a student from the University of Guam or University of Puerto Rico, and you'll be working in tandem for the spring semester of 2026, and then building something so that when we'll go into the field, you'll meet your partner, they will be able to do some groundwork, and you'll be doing interviews together. So the aspects under investigation are acute disaster preparedness, in response, sustainable energy and transition, environmental resilience, circular economy and waste, and military. So, all of these aspects are going to focus on human resilience and well being in these particular contexts, but they're important considerations across both islands. And in the development of the project, both islands were contacted and discussed about what are some of the major issues that we could be looking at under this umbrella, and these were identified. So each student will be doing one of these in either Guam or Puerto Rico. So my two teams will be looking at each of these things in both places. So what are you going to be doing? Well, you'll be helping us develop this project as we move along, starting in the spring semester. And you'll be conducting interviews in the field on location and writing an academic publication. So, the goal of the project is not just to investigate something that's been highly under-researched, which is important academically from my side of life, but for all of you, that not only are you going to get in like hands-on experience in doing something you really wouldn't otherwise doing in these types of skills, but you're also going to be able to be writing this academic paper. There's going to be multiple that respond to each of the aspects, but essentially, it's going to give you something that you could have your name on that is amazing for your resume toward grad school. So essentially, it's an opportunity that most undergrads, even some grads, have a hard time getting. So it is open to both. I'm happy to have both. Um, and so that's going to be massive toward, your careers. So the aspects of inquiry are a little more specific here. With disaster preparedness and response, after speaking with both universities, the piece of that that's most important that they think having their lived experience of this is food security. That when you have a large disruption such as a cyclone, typhoon, and hurricane, food security becomes difficult because of lack of shipping in. Um, the islands are heavily dependent on imported food now. There's not a lot of local development, so that's important. With sustainable energy and green transition, we're looking at grid and transmission. Again, when you have these big disruptive events, how long does it take to get repairs up? Are these things, how are people connected? What are these issues with energy? With environmental resilience, it's what we're seeing in the natural environment. What kind of conservation efforts are we dealing with? Or where are they stymied? With circular waste and economy, both islands have disproportionate waste issues. So more waste than they should, considering they both have significant populations of tourists that come in annually, as well as, oddly enough, the military presence next door. So that also provides a level of waste and usage of different things that you wouldn't normally see in other islands. So it creates this lack of location for where you can put waste. And then the military not just impacts the environment through, for example, waste, but local land use and how people can access land that has been taken away due to um, military. The military is a little more active on Guam than Puerto Rico, but that could change with the current administration. So there's a lot to be understood with military impacts as well. So our locations are Puerto Rico and Guam. They're both U.S. territories. Puerto Rico was brought in like Guam with the Spanish-American War in the late 1800s. Puerto Rico is in the Caribbean. It is Spanish speaking primarily, but everyone mostly speaks English as well. Um, It has a sordid history of back and forth colonial rule up until this day, I guess, technically, with the Spanish taking over for the early Taino people. Puerto Rico itself, it's lively, it's vibrant, it's full of its own really rich culture that often gets missed when we homogenize islands. It's most famous, at least now, for Bad Bunny and probably Daddy Yankee with Luis Fonsi, with a few years ago with the big hit Despacito. But essentially, there are millions and millions of Puerto Ricans living in the States. They've been a huge, big piece of American culture as well. And their status tends to make things a lot more complicated. So this is a rich, vibrant place with a lot going on. The same thing with Guam. Guam was taken by the US in the same manner in the late 1800s as well, and is sort of oddly located in the middle of what looks like nothing. But it's a really great strategic location for military operations, which is why we're there. It was a huge, huge hub for World War II, and it now has a lot of tourism coming in from Korea, Japan mostly. Um, and again, with the US military, it's both developed and not. Its population is Chamorro, which has a local language, which wasn't as eradicated as what you saw happening to Tejano in Puerto Rico. But again, everything about it is unique and vibrant and guided by colonialization from um, the Spanish, but it has a long history that is highlighted, of course, prior and through, as the Chamorro people still have quite a bit going on today. So, um, Culturally, there's again so much more to these places, even though they tend to be homogenized under the American flag. So our timeline looks like this. That we're moving into October. Your applications are going to be due on the 14th, and I will conduct some interviews as necessary. If there's enough information in your packet, I may not need to. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But if they're a necessity, we'll get that done as soon as possible so that I can have acceptance in early November. And in doing so, you will be enrolled in Poly 591. It is a graduate undergraduate course overlap, and that's what we're going to use to develop the project. So each of you will work with me in January 26th, Poly 591 class, spring semester. It is going to be a Wednesday evening class. And in a Wednesday evening, we will be able to be live Thursday morning with those from Guam, and they'll be able to zoom in as well as the folks from Puerto Rico and be able to work collectively in developing these projects. So I'm working on developing the class as we speak, and partly what you're going to be responsible for is the development of what this is going to look like, the background research, and then we'll put the class together and over the course of 15 weeks, be ready to go into the field. So the field work in Puerto Rico will take place after semester ends in spring. So that'll be late May. And with Guam, it'll be a little later in terms of mid-July into early August. And the timelines were chosen here based on what worked best for the two other universities, as well as having to work around hurricane and cyclone season timelines so that students aren't necessarily in harm's way. Your team is myself. Hi, Dr. Andrea Simonelli. This, like I mentioned earlier, this research into island impacts of climate and whatnot is my bread and butter, is my jam. I've spent all of my career bouncing between the Maldives and the Pacific and now repivoting over into US territories. So I'm happy to be leading this and bringing you to some amazing places, not unlike the ones I've already spent my time in. And I would say after a 15-year career so far in this, I cannot speak highly enough about being able to go in the field and learn experientially about where you are. I would be a totally different person without these experiences in my life, and I'm very looking forward to being able to bring that to you as well. Your local partners are Dr. Mary Cruz from the University of Guam and Dr. Jose Javier Colon Morera from University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. So we do have two teams, and I'm very looking forward to being able to lead both and make sure that you're learning from some of the best. Dr. Cruz and Dr. Morera work on local identity issues and some of these neo-colonial relationships and how this plays out with local Indigenous thought, which is great. So what it does give us is a rich theoretical baseline for this research that we're really looking at. We're looking at that with them, and then you guys have all of the little different aspects that peel off of it. So applicants will need to demonstrate a topical interest. So why do you want to do this? Connect it to your degree program and give me your GPA. Undergrads will need to have completed a 320. Poly 320 is a research methods course or equivalent. So environmental science students might have some different courses that demonstrate that you understand how to do research. What I need to assess is that everyone comes into this course in spring with the basics of understanding research. I will help build you how to do interviews and things like this. I don't expect you to have all of the knowledge right up front, but I need everyone to have a baseline. So I need your application, especially if you've not had a formal methods class and you're from a different sector, to explain to me what that looks like and how you got here. Undergraduate research projects through Europe, working with a professor. If I can see that you get it and I can check in with the professor, then we'll be fine. So, like I said, you will still be learning, hence the class, but I do need to make sure that we're all on the same page. Um, so that's why it will help to have what's going on there, the project, your grades in that, so that I know that you were on the same page and we're good. So qualified applicants, like I said, will be interviewed sort of mid-late October as needed, and that will just depend on how much I have there and how much I can get from your professors. And once accepted, you'll be automatically enrolled in the Spring 591 in early November. So with the FAQ, I have 2 pages of this, so it's going to be a minute, but I want to make sure I've covered as much as I can think of. Where will I be going? Well, Guam or Puerto Rico. The reason that I don't have students going to both is that the amount of work that it actually takes to put together a real paper in a professional manner is well more work than you normally do in a general class anyway. So therefore, I'm not trying to give you two classes worth of work and then ask you to add some more onto that and still balance that with your other work and class responsibilities. Doing a project like this is a lot of work. It's great experience. It is super if you enjoy learning and you enjoy research, but it is a lot of work. And because it is funded by a donor, we are responsible to that donor to get the work done. So I don't want you to have to do more than you're capable of, which is why I don't have people going to both. The duration is your semester of class, 2+ weeks in the field, which is about 16 days in the summer, and a few weeks of writing afterwards. So after you go and do interviews, you'll be responsible for transcription to make sure that we have all the data. I would prefer, as I stated earlier, that the students own these projects, that you're writing the papers and not me from your data. But we will manage that as necessary. But that's the commitment you're making. It's for the class, the summer project, and a few weeks of the follow-up to get everything handled from that, transcription and whatnot. So what are your specific responsibilities? Background research. The course itself is going to require you to do a lot of pulling of research, a lot of writing a lit review. A big chunk of your time there is going to be the lit review and a research plan so that we can go into the field. And that includes IRB participation. Myself and the other professors will be putting in an IRB, which that way we can do this properly and get the approval from VCU. And in order to do that, will need information from you. So I'm not expecting any of you to lead that as much as provide the information as asked when I need it. Making initial contacts on location. So that's the beauty of having a partner. Of course, you don't know where things are in Guam or Puerto Rico. I can't expect you to know. And that's the point, working with them. If you need to physically go to an office, if they need to make a physical phone call, we will check it out. We'll make some contacts. We'll handle it. That's what the two of you will be doing, probably more so your partner. Data collection and conducting local interviews. So you will be collecting these interviews and transcribing them as a way to make sure that we have that data. And you'll be doing it properly with some training from the classroom, but that's partly on your plate, as well as paper writing and hopefully data analysis. Again, the donor and myself, I want this to be yours more than mine because, well, I have so many other things going on. But more than that, you're going to get more out of it if you own this project and your piece of it. Um, I can do these projects. This is what I do for a living. Like, this is my normal. I can do this. The goal is to have you guys do this, and to be the primary authors on your papers that I can help you get published. Um, I will if I need to take over the lead on those things from those of you who have different obligations. But at the end of the day, you will get the most out of this if you own it, and I will help you get there. So what is included? This is a mostly funded opportunity in that I have a limited pool of money and we are trying to make the most of it. Therefore, your round trip flight from Richmond or maybe DC, because DC can be cheaper, and I know a lot of our students live in Nova over the summer, to either Guam or Puerto Rico. Now, the flight to Puerto Rico is pretty much straight. From DC, you might have one stop coming from Richmond, and Guam is a lot longer. It'll be about a 2-day transit to get there. So just to be clear, that it's a lot farther and a lot more adventurous, I guess, to go west than east. But your flight, regardless of price, is included. And your local accommodation for 16 days, which right now is in a dorm. So not super fancy. I will be there with you in the dorm. It is what it is. But it's on campus, at least in Guam, Puerto Rico. I still have to go over there and check in with them about what that looks like. But we're looking at something close to the university or on the university campus, dorms preferably. Again, you've got 2 weeks. This isn't a plus vacation. We're here to work, but you will have time to wander around and see things at your leisure, as well as the welcome and farewell dinners with your partners. So you're going to get to meet them and spend time and get to know them. So that's the main pieces that we're covering. Um, I do have optional potential field trips on there, and that will depend on, in the end, how airline prices iron out. If they end up being a little better than I've anticipated, then hopefully I'll be able to host a couple of different items for us to do locally, and we'll be able to cover that as well. So that's my hope, and that will just base on, like I said, how the prices end up faring in the end for the airfare. But otherwise, that is your main piece of what's included. So what are your costs then? Well, two things which should be fairly manageable. Your food. Um, Local food's not terrible. We can talk a little bit more about how to make sure you're fed. But essentially you're looking at your own food responsibility and then local transport. So there will be the necessity of a car in both locations because there's not really great public transit. However, there is rideshare apps. You can use Uber in Puerto Rico. Guam has its own. Um, and since you're working with a partner, your partners will most likely have their own vehicles. And if they do, the expectation is you, because you are responsible for transit, if they're taking you places, will be responsible to fill up their car. So this will still end up being way less cheap, or I'm sorry, way more inexpensive than necessarily getting your own car. But if students want to, I guess, share a rental car, I have no preference. How you get around to do these interviews, you might want some more freedom and to share a car and be able to take you guys all places and do things, and that's cool. I will have a rental car while there. So I will be of use for some of you as well. The car situation, there's some small local car rental places that are less expensive than your major brands. Um, but it's not terrible if you guys want to go in on something like that. But essentially, that's what you're responsible for, is getting yourself around. And again, you have a local partner, so odds are you'll be with them most of the time anyway. But you do have rideshare. I will also have a rental, and we'll work that out. But those are your two costs, with any other activities you want to do. Otherwise, we're going to get you there and we're going to make sure that, you've got accommodation. And there we go. Can I participate if I'm graduating? Yes. If you're graduating in spring, fine. As long as you will be taking the spring course with me, we can deal with that. Because this is a one sort of off opportunity, I don't have the ability to run this annually. I don't have the opportunity to tell people wait till next year. As long as you can do the main piece is getting this spring class so that you're ready to go when we've built this so that you can go into the field in the summer. So as long as you're able to commit to that, if you're graduating, that is fine. I just might need a separate, like, I definitely understand what I'm agreeing to. Because I know that when some of you graduate, you start to be pulled in different directions, but this is still a commitment that I need fulfilled. I have to stare at the funder and tell her that there's a problem. So we have a little bit more responsibility in making sure it's getting done. But yes, you can participate. How do I apply? You can be an undergrad or graduate students. Preference will be given to grads, mostly because this is a little more intense work and it's a step up in terms of responsibility for undergrads. But if you have excellent research skills as an undergrad and you are excited about doing something like this, it is still open to you. Native Spanish and Chamorro speakers are especially invited to apply because there's a good amount of local language that you are going to hear that you're going to be speaking. My Spanish, I'm working on again. I used to speak much better than I do now. And I'm learning a little bit of Chamorro, but I would really appreciate that, not just for the translational piece of this, but because we have a very large Spanish speaking population at VCU, and it'd be great to have something where you can use your native language. And our AAPI population isn't necessarily as big as our Spanish speakers, but it would be great for those who have experience or family connections here to be able to come back out to, where you're from and participate. So the application is to Guam or Puerto Rico by October 14th, and I will be sending around links that connect to that. Second page, I said this was a lot. What should my GPA be? 3.0 or higher, but I'm not trying to give you a hard time if you had a math class a couple of years ago that was hard or something like that. I'm really more concerned about your grades in research and your ability to write and conduct what we're doing. So I'm not trying to hold it against you if you had a couple of weird bad classes or an awkward semester or something. What I'm very concerned about, not as much your overall GPA, but what that looks like in your courses. So if you can do the work, I want you. And I'm not going to hold you hostage to a bad semester. Do I need a passport? That depends. As I mentioned earlier, to Puerto Rico, because most of those flights, at least from the DC area, are direct and it is American territory, you do not need a passport. However, going to Guam is where this gets more complicated, because we'd have to travel through another country. So the most expensive route is through America, meaning from here across to Honolulu and then over to Guam. That route is perennially the most expensive route. If I could get it cheap, I would love that. But it is very rarely discounted. It is almost always the same stupidly high price. And I know this from having to use that same flight, which goes as an island hopper across the Pacific when I used to work in the Marshall Islands. So no matter what you do, United has a monopoly on it. It's stupid expensive, but it is much cheaper, which would allow us again money to do extra things for me to take you out to dinner again, for me to be able to do a, field trip if we go through either Korea, Philippines, Hong Kong, or Japan. So if we transit through these countries, you will need a passport because you'll have to be able to fly into them. Hence, for them to take you, even in transit, you'll need a passport. So the main routes of transit into Guam are from where they get the most tourists. So from Incheon, from Manila, from Hong Kong, or Haneda. So I've done this route myself to figure out how this would work. I went through Manila. It was pure chaos. But it was very inexpensive. So partly the decision as we go forward for how we go there to Guam will depend on what these prices look like, unfortunately. I wish I could just pick ahead of time. Um, Korea, Hong Kong, or Japan will have obviously a different food and very smooth, less chaotic transition. The Philippines is absolute chaos, but it's an adventure. So, like I said, partly it's going to just end up on what is the price point and how to get ourselves through here, the most economical and reasonable way for everyone's sanity involved. So if you do want to do Guam, I recommend that you will need a passport. Also, if you want to fly somewhere else while you're out there or visit something, or I'm sure we can make some adjustments to our itinerary for you. If you want to stay longer, or you know what I'm saying, we can figure something out. I don't care if you want to spend half of your summer in Korea and then go. We'll work it out because we're going to get you to there as part of your plane ticket. So if you do want to do any of that, you definitely will need a passport. So I do apologize. The goal for the trip was to make this easy with no passport necessary, but the price point just is kind of high with that. So I'd prefer not to unless I have to. So if you cannot get one, if we're having government issues, but I really want you to be in the trip, if I have to send one of you through Hawaii and the rest of you through another route, I'm really going to try to keep us together. So I'm going to try that. So hopefully most of you have passports who have interest in Puerto Rico. I'm sorry, in Guam, just so that this is easier. When are the travel dates? So May 15th to the 31st for Puerto Rico, which is right after semester ends, the final grades are due, graduations happen, then we head out. And then for Guam, it's July 18th through August 2nd. So hurricane season begins on June 1st. So we are out before hurricane season, even though usually it takes a little while for it to pick up in the Caribbean. And July is a little bit better in terms of those same type of cyclone issues um, for Guam. So, middle of July through August. So it's the middle of your summer. That's why I said if anyone wants to go early somewhere, that's fine. I'm cool. We'll work it out. But Guam is going to have plus or minus a couple travel days. So it takes about 2 days to get there and 2 days to get back, depending on how we manage. Um, so essentially, that trip will end up looking a little more like July 16th through August 4th. And that's just because that's how long it takes to get there. So to have the 16 days on the ground, we need to make sure that we leave before then. And so your travel to Guam, like I said, it's going to be a little more of an adventure and it's also going to be quite a bit longer. I will help students understand how to manage that best. I do this all of the time. I am doing a long haul flight. So my whole career has been a long haul airline. So I'm very used to it. I know how to manage it. I will help you if you are uneasy. What are my food options? Well, for food there, we've got local restaurants, there are food delivery apps, there's lots of local grocery stores. The price point's usually a little bit higher, but there is ability to cook in the dorms. You have a microwave, you have a little bit of a cooking area. It's not super fancy, but you'll be able to make this less expensive. You don't have to eat out every meal. But because it's America, especially for those going to Puerto Rico, it's a short half a day trip. You could go to Costco and get yourself some granola bars and things or protein shakes, like all of those things can be brought in because we don't have customs issues, at least into Puerto Rico. If we go through country into Guam, it's a little bit weird. It's doable still, but we do have to go through customs and tell them, hey, we've got American snacks, and they'll be fine. So you do have the opportunity to not just do some minor cooking, but you don't have to eat out every single meal. We also can arrange, at least in Guam, to have breakfast delivered. I'm not sure what the cost will be for that, but as far as I was aware, it looked fairly reasonable at the local restaurant down the street from the um, dorm. I ate there when I was there a few weeks ago. The food was excellent, so I'm sure we could even get that delivered every morning for you at a certain price point that's reasonable. So these things we can all work out, and I'm happy to help with whatever we need to do for that because I don't want, you know, breakfast bars holding someone back. Do I need a second language? No. The primary language of both places is English, but in Puerto Rico, Spanish is spoken in many more professional settings as the normal everyday first language. So therefore, if you do speak Spanish, yes, it is an asset for that. Chamorro is not as much of a business language of Guam, but you'll be able to also rely on your partner for language help, but prior skills are definitely an asset because it's just one less issue that you may have. Because, like anything else, if you go somewhere where you don't necessarily speak much of someone's language, it can create just inconveniences and issues. So it's a great benefit, but it's not required. Do I need any vaccines? No. Luckily, we're still America. We don't have these types of problems. But I would bring bug repellent because, again, it's a dorm, so it's not super fancy, and there's always bugs everywhere because these are tropical locations. What is the accommodation like? Well, it's a two-shared dorm room. And at least for Guam, I'm not sure about Puerto Rico yet. They're pretty strict on your sex ratio. There's not mixed. It's, male or female dorms. So I don't have a preference on how this all plays out based on how who ends up being in this group. The male and female dorms are connected by a little hallway, so if the group is divided, we're not going to not see each other. But it is a twin share, and there are 5 spots for Guam and 5 spots for Puerto Rico for a total of 10 opportunities here. So there will be one person on either side that will have to probably bunk with a local because that's at least how they're going to deal with that in Guam is they're going to put someone else in the room. So you'll be sharing a room, a dorm room there. I'm not quite sure how it'll play out in Puerto Rico yet. I will be there in a couple weeks to figure out their dorms. And the most important question of all, I'm sure, will I have time to go to the beach? It's so pretty. Yes, of course. I have us arriving over a weekend. So you've got a couple of days to acclimate yourself. You'll have 2 weeks of work with a weekend in between, and then we leave after. So there will be time to be able to do things. And if you can do a couple of interviews a day, then you'll have the rest of the day to do fun stuff. So think of it as an incentive to get your work done. Because the sooner you get it done, the sooner you can chill out. Because there should be plenty of time to do stuff. And look, the locals are going to want to take you places and show you things. So I want to make sure there's plenty of time for you to have the experience of being there as well. Partly you will learn from just doing those things as well as doing your interviews. So Guam's campus has access to the sea. It's a little bit rough over there, so you might need to be a better swimmer. Puerto Rico's campus is a little farther inland, but there's all kinds of ways to get to the shore and be able to go. So no one will be keeping you from the beach. And there will definitely be time to have fun because essentially you don't get to learn about a place unless you spend time doing things like that as well. So if you have additional questions, please email me at acsimonelli@vcu.edu. I will answer them as quickly as possible. You will also get the links, at least through an email and on the website for this to the applications. Please let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns. I am very much looking forward to hosting all of you to do something really exciting. And I just want to emphasize that in this current political situation, the federal government would not be funding something like this. We have an opportunity to do something important based on actual needs of disadvantaged populations that we otherwise would not be able to have funded. So this is a great moment to do something we otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to do right now. And so I really hope that you appreciate that we get a lot out of it, that everyone has a great time, and that we learn some good stuff, and you all get to flourish out of this. So I appreciate everyone's attention. I hope very much that we have a great time, and I look forward to your applications.